Hey, good afternoon, Liberty North AP Psych. Welcome to the afternoon live stream. As we finish up chapter 18 today, we talk about the last 3 learning targets and the essential question. Then we'll be done. So again, the only thing that you need to do besides your AP notebook, vocab, and names is just complete the chapter 18 lab, which is on Canvas. All chapter 15 assignments were due Friday. So if you haven't gotten those in, then obviously I would suggest that you get those in as soon as you can. And then tomorrow we will start our last unit, which will be 16 and 17 psych disorders and treatment. So I will get that information up on Canvas moment. But I hope everybody's doing well, and we'll go and get started. So if you want to get out your learning targets for chapter 18 social psych, behind me I have 10, 11, and 12. And then down at the bottom, I've got the essential question that we'll be going over, which is, I usually don't go over the essential questions. You just basically know that you need to know those. This one's a little bit different, though. It kind of actually, when you read it, you can kind of think, well, this doesn't have anything to do with chapter 18. It might not be asking me about chapter 18. So that's why we're going to go over that one as well. Okay. Okay. So AP learning target number 10. Ask you processes that contribute to different treatment of group members. So we're still on group members and group influence, but this one is group to group or internally within the group. So if I'm in a group or program or team or leadership with a group of people, what can determine how I treat them, and specifically how I can treat each member differently, possibly. Okay. On this learning target number 10, it lists a lot of vocab again. I'm not going to go over all of them. I think I have all of them listed here. There's a couple that I think you should be able to get. You probably can get more than that. So I'm just going to go over some big ones, and then I'll zoom it in so you can see them. But the big one here, make sure you get the first one, is in-group, out-group bias. Or sorry, just in-group, out-group at this point. And I have us and them written on it. And I think this is a very important concept that you need to grasp, because basically all these other terms could be explained using in-group, out-group. And I think a lot of times it also gives you the other vocab terms as well, okay? So in-group, out-group basically means that there's just different groups. So there's nothing negative here. There's in-group is Liberty North, out-group is Liberty. Now, that just means the groups are different, okay? If you say in-group, out-group bias, or we get into prejudice, then we're saying that the negative group or the out-group is negative, okay? But just the fact that there are different groups, okay? At Liberty North, there are even different clubs, activities. The ones you are involved in are your in-group. The ones that you're not are your out-group, okay? Just meaning there's a difference and you're not in those groups. Now, if the out-group is completely neutral or even positive, but you're just not a part of it, then it's just basically in-group, out-group, okay? So us, them, right? Now, if my out-group then becomes negative, derogatory, or whatever, then we start getting into prejudice, okay? That's kind of where we start looking at prejudice in psychology. So especially if it's undeserved, it's just based on stereotype biases, okay? Then it becomes an issue, okay? So if the fact that there's Liberty North and Liberty is just a fact of demographics, it's a fact of size, we needed 2 high schools, okay? We're all in the same city, so on and so forth. So if you just view Liberty as it's just Liberty, they're different, it's a different high school, we have a rivalry, but when you start getting to where people who go to Liberty High School are negative, derogatory, and all that stuff, then we start getting into prejudice, okay? All right? So at the core of all this is in-group, out-group, us, them, okay? All right. Ethnocentrism up here, term number 2, okay? Basically means that, and I put up their own culture, okay? All right, own culture, all right? And that means that basically I compare everything to my culture or my group, okay? So that's the standard, that's the norm that I look, and I compare all other groups of people or places to, okay? Now, some people believe that in ethnocentrism, you believe that your group has better stuff. And again, that could be in-group, out-group. Okay, there's just different cultures. They do it differently than we do. But again, if it starts getting negative, then we start getting into prejudice, okay? So ethnocentrism is basically, I'm going to judge everything based on the standard of my culture or my group, okay? Prejudice, again, is basically in-group, out-group. Out-group has negative connotations to it, okay? Negative opinions, attitudes, hostile actions, therefore, okay? Bias, all right, is, which we'll talk about down here in your essential question, is basically a pattern or a tendency to think a certain way, okay? So if I have what we call in-group, out-group bias, basically it means that my tendency is that in any situation, if I'm in the in-group, I tend to be biased towards my group, and the other group is not as good as I am, maybe not necessarily negative. Again, if it's negative, then we get into prejudice, okay? Discrimination, I'll leave that one on you. Scapegoat theory is when I blame. When there needs to be fault or blame, I automatically look to the out group to do that. We're actually going to see, and this is very interesting here if we use the example of politics in America, okay? We should have two natural in-group, out-groups, correct? Democrats, Republicans, right? Now that's just a fact of politics, that they differ on views, okay? So as long as there is an in-group, out-group there, because obviously we know that our politics are polarizing, okay? Now, is there prejudice involved in our politics? And I would argue that there probably is, based on actions and words and things that are spoken and said by our politicians. And I would say that there's definitely an in-group, and then the out-group is negative, that we're hostile towards them. We have bias towards the out-group, okay? We have scapegoat theories, okay? They blame each other all the time when something goes wrong or something is delayed or something doesn't work. They use the other group as a scapegoat, okay? So that's fascinating, I think, to me, social psychology. If we look strictly, most of the time when you think of prejudice, you're thinking of, within ethnic cultures or ethnicity in the country. But man, it could be just groups. You could be prejudiced against groups of people. So that can happen. If it's school, if there's a group of athletes or whatever that you're hostile to, you're negative to, and it's unjustified, that could even get into prejudice. So in social psych, it can be expanded upon anytime basically there's a negative, derogatory, hostile connotation put into the other group that is not justified or deserved, okay? And then mere exposure, we'll talk about that down here when we get into attraction. But basically, the more I'm exposed to something, the more I become comfortable with it, the more I become attracted to it. I like it, so on and so forth, okay? So if you think about the first time that you ever tried something new and you're like, hey, this is pretty cool. Well, then the more that you did it, you probably liked it more and more, okay? So I'm going to hold this up here and let you see these. Back up, sorry. Okay, so the only ones I didn't go over are stereotype and discrimination, which I think you should know. Okay, the rest of them mostly could be explained in the in-group, out-group using that idea or theory, principle, whatever you want to call it. Okay, the rest of them could be explained in in-group, out-group. Okay. All right, so then let's go down to learning target number 11, which is altruism and aggression, okay? I've got them separated here. So altruism is basically helping behavior. It's a theory of helping behavior, okay? So this is all gonna get back to Kitty Genevieve's case. So again, you need to make sure you watch that video, read the section in your book, or just Google Kitty Genevieve's case. You get lots of stuff. I know there's a quote in our book that says probably the most important event, case in relation to social psychology is the Kitty Genevieve's case. You can learn everything that you need to know about social psychology based on this case, okay? and it developed theories of helping behavior, right? So it kind of basically, because of this case and the research that followed, we kind of understand now that getting help or helping others is largely determined by the situation and not just the individual person. It's actually both. But we cannot perform the fundamental attribution error, remember, and not count or consider the social situation when trying to attribute helping behavior, okay? And again, one of the famous theories is the bystander effect, okay, that came from this. And the whole goal here, or the whole summary of the event, is that the situation sometimes will determine whether I get help or not what type of person or people are helping me, right? Okay. And so if you read in the book, it lists a whole bunch of factors that if they're here, you're probably not going to get help. And if these are here, then you are going to get help. Okay. So it's the social situation. Well, in psychology and probably philosophy, I think we have two different types of helping behavior. We have altruistic and we have egoistic. Okay. Altruistic behavior is true selfless helping behavior. You truly seek to help in a selfless manner with nothing to gain. Egoistic means that I'm helping, but there is some type of selfish motivation, okay? Now, again, remember, both of these are helping behavior, so you're still helping, right? But egoism or egoistic theory basically says that all helping behavior can be brought back to a root or brought back to at least one selfish motivation, right? So if I'm helping people to boost up my resume or to get community service hours, that would be egoistic. Okay, it's not saying it's bad. It just comes back to selfish. Okay, if I'm helping somebody because I want to feel bad, or if you hear people say all the time, well, I'd like to think that that's what somebody would have done for me. That's egoistic. That's egoistic. There's some type of selfishness there. Okay. So altruism is true selfless behavior. Okay. All right. And we do have true selfless acts, and we know that through countless stories. A really great example is Dr. Viktor Frankl. He's not in your book, very famous psychologist. He is a Holocaust survivor. And after the Holocaust, he actually wrote a couple of books that I know of, maybe more, about the good things that happened in the concentration camps, the acts of altruism that were all around the camps as people tried to take care of each other, most of the time at the sacrifice of their own lives or punishment for themselves, so on and so forth. So despite the horrors of the concentration camps and the atmosphere and death and all that stuff, Dr. Viktor Frankl wrote several books about just the true altruistic stuff that he saw. He saw the best of humankind within that situation at times, and not just the horror of the Holocaust as a whole. So, and then he also he has several famous social psychology theories, and then also therapy techniques as well. But just a great author and a survivor, okay, of the Holocaust, all right? And again, make sure you know Kitty Genevieve's case, bystander effect, okay? All right? All right, aggression. I think it asks, what are the principles involved in aggression? Okay, so let's first of all go into, there is a debate currently, I think. I'm not sure, well, I know that not every part of psychology believes that aggression is biological. Some people believe it's completely learned. So we're not programmed to be aggressive. So I've got factors up here. I didn't list observational learning. Do you remember factors that increase or the likelihood of aggression? Remember the Bobo et al. So observational learning with Bandura would be one that I left out. And then I do have some biological up here. So we know that genetic, okay, that there are some genetic processes involved. And this is based on research that seem to indicate also brain influences. They have huge research on this. So TBI, traumatic brain injuries, can cause aggression. Again, think back to Phineas Gage, all right? Left frontal lobe is severely damaged, and he became very aggressive, right? Couldn't function around people, very foul-mouthed, just a really tough, out-of-shape character, okay, because of his traumatic brain injury. We also know that there are biochemical influences, hormones and neurotransmitters. So we know, again, that there are certain illicit drugs that you can take or medication you can take that alter your mind to where you can become aggressive, like with steroids. if you take the, not the anabolic steroids, but like steroids to decrease inflammation, inflammation in your body can lead to some aggressive type behaviors. So, we have evidence that it does have a biological component. And again, we would link this all back to your amygdala. So if you remember that from your AP notebook, but my amygdala is my emotional center, and it is responsible for aggressive type behavior. Also, we can go back to sleep and dreaming. If you remember that most of our dreams are aggressive, they're negative. So that seems to be in there. It seems to be hardwired into the brain, that type of response. And you could also justify it with survival, with nature, that we need to have an aggressive side or aggressive response ready if it increases survival. Okay, so we got some biological here, genetic, brain influences, biochemical. Then we've got some nurture stuff here. We've got the frustration aggression principle, which basically says that if I'm already frustrated, it's easy for me to become more likely for me to become aggressive. So most aggressive behavior has a root in just being frustrated. We also know that there's observational learning, right, from Bandura. I can learn it from my environment. So these are all just kind of factors that, again, of the situation, not necessarily some of it is in the individual, but other stuff is in the situation. So if the situation is frustrating and aggravating, then I'm going to possibly jump into aggression more. Same thing, okay? Same thing with Bandura. If the situation is modeling aggression, I'll probably be more likely to slip into aggression, okay? Okay, no questions, good. All right, and then learning target number 12, okay, which is attraction, okay, attraction, okay? And once we get through this, a very interesting question from this morning, which was, isn't it true that opposites attract? So we'll talk about that. So we have the mere exposure effect, again, which is up here, which basically says that if I am exposed to something over and over and over, I become more comfortable with it. I like it more, and I'm more attracted to it, okay? All right, so that can explain it. These are not all or nothing theories as well, but if I am exposed to something more and more and more, I just kind of over time start to like it more, okay? Culture obviously has a great impact on what is attractive and what is not. Cultural norms and standards are used to kind of set the image or what is attractive, and that can change per decade, per years, per trends, but it kind of shows you what is attractive and what's not. And then you have, if you recognize these from our Gestalt, chapter 5 and 6, or 6 with perception, proximity, things that are more likely to be around me, I'm going to have more exposure with, okay, which make them more attractive, more comfortable, and things that are similar to me, okay, similarity. All right, now, the good question was, well, I thought opposites attract. And I think that is true. I think opposites do attract at times. But I think most of research is going to support that generally we're probably more comfortable and we like stuff that we're similar to. Now, there could be a reason for opposites attract, and it definitely does happen. My wife and I are examples of that. I was the athlete, the competitor. She's into music, piano. She was a music performance major. So, eventually we got together and obviously are still together and married and very blessed from that. But I think if you look at both of our dating experiences before that, we dated people that were similar to us. Which is just kind of, so not all or nothing, but that just kind of is another example of the situation explaining attraction, okay? Okay, all right. So let's get down to our essential question here, which, let me pull out the sheet here. So there's only one, okay? I wanted to go over this one specifically because when you read it, it doesn't necessarily indicate that you need to write down anything from chapter 18, or some people have already emailed me and said, well, where's the social psychology aspect of this question? Okay, so the question is, how does the bias of research affect their conclusions? Okay, so again, if we go back to the definition of bias, which is kind of central to the question, bias is the tendency to think a certain way, or the pattern to think a certain way. It is a heuristic, if you remember back to chapter 10, so it's a mental shortcut, okay, in which we kind of generally favor our own group's thinking, ideas, and pattern and view, okay, which again, we get back up here to in-group, out-group, okay? So if I have a bias, obviously it restricts my view of research, and actually it restricts and hurts the scientific method, because I have a tendency or pattern to think only in a certain way, right? So it's kind of like when we talk about problem solving, if you become fixated on one type of method or whatever, it's going to block the view of solving the problem, okay? Also, if I'm favoring one's own group, I'm kind of also having in-group, out-group bias, okay? All right? Okay, so you just need to kind of know the effects of research. And what I think they want you to do is basically apply social psychology, what we've learned, to research, okay? And that the situation can influence research, right? People's individual factors can influence research. Our bias, our in-group, out-group look, scapegoat, prejudice, exposure, all those could be applied to research. It might be a different context, but it's still the same thing, okay? So if I have a tendency to think in a pattern or a certain way, would that bias my research? Absolutely. If I tend to favor one's view over another, yes, because again, I'm limiting my focus. I'm basically hurting reliability and validity, okay? So just be able to do that there with your essential question, okay? Right, so that's 10, 11, and 12. I'll put a pickup on Twitter, okay? And then again, remember that the only assignment you have for this chapter besides your AP notebook is just the chapter 18 lab, so make sure that you are completing that and getting that done. And then tomorrow we're going to start notes on with psych disorders, so very fascinating. Great chapter and unit to end up on. Be very interesting, and just like last chapter, I'll have a lot of videos about the disorders and things that we're covering. So tomorrow will be the intro, and then we'll get into that. And we'll probably be on that we will be until the end of school. So it's hard to believe this is the 5th week of virtual learning. When you look back, it just doesn't seem that long, but in other aspects it does. So if you have any questions, let me know. Email me, contact me. If you don't have your chapter 15 stuff, make sure you get that in. Okay? All right, guys. Have a good day.